Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by other prospect experts here on the site, Peter Baracchini and Dayton Reimer. Guys, we're just after the Hlinka Gretzky tournament, and we had some hockey to watch, which is nice when it's the dog days of August, when there's nothing going on in the NHL at all. Zero news, except lately there's been a couple things. There was an offer sheet for Broberg and Holloway, so that's pretty big news that came out. Both obviously not prospects anymore, but they're still quite young. How's it going, Peter?
Yeah, doing great, Matt. Happy that, there was some hockey to watch in August, like there is every year right now, and basically kickstarting the 2025 draft season right now. And, for what it's worth, it was absolutely a very thrilling tournament. It seemed like there was great parity and great balance all around. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to see what the season brings now.
For sure. I mean, it was a really good tournament, and like I said, we're going to talk about it. And yeah, it's always good just to have some hockey to watch, even if it's not regular season or anything like that. And how's it going, Dayton?
It's good. I unfortunately missed most of the tournament, so I had to go just rely on the highlights. But I was at least going outside and doing summary things. So, I mean, well, you can't have both, I guess.
For sure. Yeah, it is the off season where this is the only real hockey that happens right now. So, but yeah, it was a really good tournament. I saw a few. I didn't see a lot of the games either, but I did catch up with what happened and a lot of the stuff that was going around Twitter and all that too. So, let's get into it and start with the gold medal game, which was a tight game. Czechia and Canada going head to head. We got a 2-1 final. Canada winning that. Their gold medal. They seem to win a lot of gold medals in the Hlinka Gretzky, and had some real standouts during the tournament. So I'll start with you, Peter. Who do you, not just from the gold medal game, the whole tournament, who stood out for you from Canada?
I think the easier question would be who didn't stand
right?
out. I mean, there were very few players that really had, bad lapses or bad moments. I mean, it was a very, very deep team for Team Canada. And, obviously you got to start on the back end with Matthew Schaefer, who captained the team. I mean, going into the season, I think a lot may have pegged him as the top defender in this class and the top OHLer to come out from the Ontario Hockey League. And I think he just solidified that. I know it's early on in the draft season, but I think he is definitely the guy to dethrone as a top defender in this class. And you saw everything that stood out or made you be in shock and awe during the U18s, because it basically carried over right now. The mobility, the confidence, the ability to jump into play, the two-way presence. And even when there was a mistake, or maybe he was caught flat-footed, he recovered very well and got back into position. That's the makings and staples that you want to see in a top pairing defender. Schaefer had all that. I came away very impressed with him. In goal, Jack Ivankovic, I think he was the main reason why Canada got to that point. Led all goaltenders in save percentage and goals against average. Only allowed 3 goals throughout the whole entire tournament. So yeah, he was definitely very steady as the backstop for Team Canada. And up front, obviously Gavin McKenna, absolutely amazing what he could do, but you also look at the depth and talent of what the 2025 class can offer with, the likes of Cole Reshny, Caleb Desnoyers, Emile Guite, Cameron Schmidt. I think the list goes on and on with a lot of the forwards that really stood out and had a big impact for Team Canada. And it's clear why they won 25 gold, because they had their best players play at this tournament and they succeed and they rise to the occasion. And it was just absolutely amazing to see how deep this roster could be, both up front, back, and, in goal as well.
It's also looking at this and you're like looking forward to a World Juniors, or some of these guys could potentially be, not potentially, a lot of these guys will be at the World Juniors in the future, not this year, but maybe next year. And you're going to see a lot of these guys, and that's what's always awesome seeing the progression of these going through and going from the, like you say, the U18s and then Hlinka Gretzky and then the U20s later on. Dayton, what about you? Who were you impressed by from Team Canada throughout this tournament?
Yeah, most of the guys that, all the guys that Peter mentioned were definitely impressive. Canada had an amazing team, and you didn't have anyone really who was kind of dragging their feet. A few guys that you didn't mention, I thought Brady Martin looked really good in the final. He was a great play driver. He was crucial in setting up that first goal. You mentioned Caleb Desnoyers. I thought he looked really good. I like his speed. I like his size. I think he's got good size. He looked big out there anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two. And then of course, Jack Ivankovic was excellent. He looked really solid. He looked really calm. Canada had just had a really good, deep team. And no matter where someone was playing, they contributed for the most part. I think there's a few guys that we might end up talking about a little bit later, but yeah, really good team. Had a great game against Czechia to win the gold. At least from what I saw. Of course, I watched the highlights. But no, definitely deserved it. It's always fun to check out some of those guys who are just coming up.
For sure, yeah. Canada, of course, deserving of the gold medal. They didn't get it easy, though. Czechia put up, obviously, a fight because it was only a 2-1 game. Czechia was in it the whole time, and they were definitely deserving of being there. Biggest guy that was part of Czechia was Adam Binak, who broke the Hlinka Gretzky Cup record. And of course, second silver for him too. So Dayton, who stood out? I mean, of course, talk about him. First of all, he's the biggest standout from Czechia. You can start there, I guess.
Yeah, no, Benak was great. He had just a deadly shot. He showed that he could set up right where he needed to be. He was always right in front of the net. He was always involved. He was, I think, at least in the consideration of one of Czechia's best players. Another guy that stuck out to me, though, was Vit Zahayski. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yep.
I listened to it so many times, and that J throws me off every time I look at it. I was really impressed with him. Any clip that I saw of Czechia, he seemed to be there when the puck was in their possession. He was very quick. He had great movement. He had really strong awareness of where the play was going. He's definitely a very interesting prospect, and I think a strong reason why Czechia was in the final in the first place.
For sure, yeah. Both those guys were leaders on Czechia all throughout the tournament. I heard Benak's name so much throughout, and breaking that record is pretty crazy. When you got so many different names that he basically beat, and that yeah, he really increased his stock if it wasn't high already. Peter, what'd you think about Czechia? I mean, Benak was definitely the biggest standout, but anyone else? And you can also talk about him too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, when you look at Benak's, stature or whatever, it looks like 5'7". It's listed as 5'7", 157 on Elite Prospects, but he kind of looked a little bit bigger on the ice. So looks like maybe if he's growing a little bit more, he's going to grow into that frame. Hopefully that's going to work to his advantage. But even then, the size factor really didn't affect him at all. So yeah, that was the one thing that I took from Benak's game. Vizaheski, Dayton already mentioned him, but I'm going to mention Radim Murka. One of their go-to defenders on the back end. He only had, I believe, 2 assists during the whole entire tournament and was named Czechia's best player of the game in the gold medal game. So, I noticed a lot of he rose to the occasion in that game, being a play driver on the back end, having good hands, leading the attack. I think he has the confidence to do that, and he's got very good mobility for his size. I think he's one name to watch out for that's slowly starting to increase his stock right now. And Andrei Stebatak, obviously we talk about how great Jack Ivankovic was, but I think he was the next best goaltender behind him. 127 goals against average, 947 save percentage in 4 games. really stood tall, even when Canada was mounting the pressure. Like, he really stood tall on his head. Gave Czechia a fighting chance every single second until, they scored with 8 seconds left. A little bit too little too late, but you know what? He really gave them a fighting chance. And, when he made a big stop at one end, Ivan Kovac matched that at the other. So it was really great to see that goaltending battle between the two, and Step Attack really stood out for me as well.
Yeah, well, when it's a 2-1 game, you're going to have the goaltenders playing well. I mean, it's not like they both, stole games or anything. There wasn't a huge amount of shots each side, but yeah, really good goaltending battle there. I've been at 11 points, finishing the tournament with 11 points behind. Who was it again? I just read it. My gosh. I just had it here. Yeah. I was just reading it. My God. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, and then broke the all-time scoring record for the Hlinka Gretzky, which is pretty crazy. Early in the round robin, too. He didn't just do it in the gold medal game. He did it really early on. So, yeah, it's going to be amazing to watch him, what he does this year going up to the draft for sure. All right, let's move to the bronze medal game. And this was between Sweden and the U.S. Sweden coming out on top 6-3 in that one. So not as close as the gold medal game. So Sweden comes out. Peter, who did you see that stood out on Sweden going into the bronze medal game here?
Yeah, I think you got to look at Victor Klingso, as we just mentioned, who led the tournament in scoring. Benak was behind him, 12 points in 5 games. And that top line of Klingso, Stenberg, and Gastrin were just lights out good for Sweden. I mean, that's where they got all their offense most of the tournament. Secondary scoring kind of had a little bit of trouble there, but you got to look at Klingso in terms of another player increasing his stock as potentially throwing his name into the hat as a first rounder. You got to love the energy that he brought. You got to love the skill and the speed. He's got soft hands and he's very confident in, making moves in tight spaces. And he was just an absolute threat on the ice every single time. So, one of the standouts there, again, probably going to be the easy. I usually don't pick the easy options, but it's hard to ignore at this time. Ivar Stenberg, who's up for the 2026 draft, he looked very, very solid. Younger brother of Otto Stenberg, and Milton Gastrin. I really liked the composure and the ability to attack the middle of the ice every single time that he had the puck or he got that opportunity. He really made his presence felt and just driving hard to the net and being a factor down low. I really thought that top line for Sweden was very, very effective and basically the main standouts for them all tournament.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the guy that led the tournament so you have to mention him for sure. And Sweden's going to have some, after their maybe underwhelming 2024 draft where we didn't have a lot of high end guys, seems like there's going to be some in the 2025 and then beyond too. So I think Sweden's coming around again to get back their first round picks and stuff. So Dayton, what do you think about Sweden?
No, I think Sweden looked very good. I think almost too, they benefited from just an American team that kind of fell apart. The US did not look very strong when I watched some of the clips of the Swedes getting chances, and they just kind of collapsed on themselves. Still, I thought there was a few guys who stuck out. Someone maybe super underrated, Melvin Novotny, I thought was pretty strong. He had really good pressure on that first goal in the final. And seemed to show up every now and then. He had some good speed, had some good awareness. He's somebody I think I'm going to keep an eye on moving forward. Eric Nielsen as well. He really strong shot. I loved how accurate it was. I believe it was the second Swedish goal where he just throws it in the corner and somehow it goes in. Like, you don't score that without knowing exactly where the net is. Like, that's sure it's lucky, but you need a little bit more than luck to score something like that. I also liked East Wozniak. I thought he had a pretty good final. I don't know if you can say that for the entire tournament, but he looked strong. He had great hand-eye coordination. He had great awareness. He looked more like what you'd expect from a player projected to be in the top half of the first round.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, Sweden's got I think they're turning the tide again. I mean, you wouldn't think that they would take another draft or they weren't going to be have strong first rounders. And I think this coming draft, you're going to see it again, and this is already starting from the Hlinka Gretzky. Peter, what about the U.S.? I mean, yeah, I guess they did make it to the bronze medal game. But usually they're a lot stronger, although, I mean, Czechia did make it to the gold medal last year too, and it was Canada, Czechia. But I mean, did anyone stand out from the US even though they did get a medal?
Absolutely. And yeah, you could kind of say that maybe this is kind of like Sweden last year. Maybe Team USA with this age group maybe kind of has taken a step back. But then again, you don't have the top tier talent that are up for the draft. I mean, James Higgins wasn't there.
Yeah.
You know, Trethewey. You got a number of other USA players that didn't quite make the team that if they were on there, I'm pretty sure they had a fighting chance. So maybe the depth was a little bit lacking, but I really liked Blake Fiddler on the back end, who captained Team USA. I really thought that he had great, poise on the back end. He has great hockey sense overall. And he plays that strong, steady two-way game where, if he's without the puck, he's going to make life miserable for forwards. And he defends the rush very well. He even had like very strong goal against, a massive rout against Germany where he just took it to the net and just basically did everything himself. Really made it look easy as, that was the main caption on the NHL Network tweet that, I'm just looking at right now because he did make it look very easy. Yeah, I really thought that he stood out very well. Benjamin Cavan, I really thought that he really stood out or got better as the tournament went on with his ability to open things up and, be a facilitator of the puck. Really thought he made smart plays, tack the net, and he's just a great support type of player that will dish the puck out, spot players. He can do it all. And I really thought that he really stood out in a big way for Team USA.
Yeah, it's tough when some of the bigger names aren't there. And US has some really good talent coming up in the 2025 draft, but not all of them can be in these tournaments, Hlinka Gretzky. So sometimes they're a little shorthanded. I mean, even Canada was a bit shorthanded from what some of their top guys are going to go, but they can seem to be able to ice a team anyway. That's really good, even though they're missing some of those guys. But yeah, bronze medal. I mean, Sweden definitely deserves it, and had some really good performers in the U.S. Got there too. So, even though they were fourth in the whole tournament here. All right, for the other teams, Slovakia 5th place after beating Germany 5-2, and then Finland going 7th place against Switzerland, winning 5-2 as well. Dayton, from those teams, is there anyone that kind of stood out for you throughout the tournament?
For Slovakia, I don't know if they had the greatest tournaments, but Sverchek I thought looked pretty good. He had 3 goals, led the team in scoring, and had a strong finish. Maybe not a great start from what I could find out, but no, he looked pretty strong. Another guy from Slovakia, Sam Marin, he made some good plays against Canada, even though Canada in that game kind of owned the game the entire time. But I thought he looked at least competent during that showing. And sorry, what was the other team you mentioned?
So there's Slovakia, Germany, Finland, and Switzerland are the other teams.
Right. So I missed that you said all of them. Just 2.
Out of all those teams.
Out of all of them. For Germany, I thought I think it's never mind. Lewandowski, I thought was pretty strong. Maybe not great mobility, but good offensive sense. For Finland, I think Joki was pretty strong. He had some really good energy and physicality, something I think the Finns were pretty universally strong at, but just kind of lacked that offensive dominance that they needed to get a medal. And then with Switzerland, I think there was only one guy worth mentioning, which is Ashleman. He only had 2 goals. No one else had double goals. Probably going to be the top prospect from Switzerland this year. I don't know how many other ones are going to jump up on the radar.
Yeah, I mean it's Switzerland they seem to be able to get some guys that are just flying under the radar in these drafts, and we'll see once the draft gets going.
Mhm.
Peter, what about you from those teams? Who'd you see stand out there?
Yeah, I think of Slovakia, Michael Prado. I think he was one of those very underrated in terms of the goaltenders throughout the tournament. Even when things looked very dicey, he made some really stellar saves. Obviously, maybe some outcomes didn't quite work out in his favor, but I really liked him. He's another top goaltender to watch. I don't know if he's going to be at the same standard as, Jack Ivankovic for the draft, but I definitely think that he's really put his name on the radar in terms of like being a solid mid-round goaltender to keep an eye on. I really thought he looked very steady. In terms of Germany, I really like the Grieva brothers, Gustas and Richards. I thought they led the team in scoring. They really had, I believe they even connected to, or even one of them scored during that overtime winner against Finland, which really kind of set the tone for Finland for that tournament. That was a huge turnaround for them. So I thought the two brothers looked really solid there. In terms of going to Finland, it's really hard to pick a standout because this is kind of one of those down years for them overall, and it's something that you saw the work ethic and how they played. It's just they didn't get the results, and that to me is a big factor of what happened or how the tournament played out for them. But I do think that if everything's loading for me properly, I'm all over the place right now. I do think that Max Westergaard was probably their best player. I believe he had like 3 or 4 goals throughout the tournament. Um, Obviously he's the top Finnish prospect to come out of there for this season. Great size, he's got the power behind the shots. That's what you want to see in a goal scorer. He's definitely got that down pat. Nothing seems to be loading for me right now. Sorry about that. Yeah, so 3 goals in 4 games for Westergaard. Again, kind of tough when you had the kind of tournament that they did where they didn't get results and it may be a bit of a weaker draft class. And as for Switzerland too, yeah, I think Eichelman was basically their top player. Tough to pinpoint out because, Switzerland was the weakest team out of the whole entire group, but 16-year-old definitely has some room to grow. And I think he's going to be probably a bright spot for this team in the future.
Yeah, I say Switzerland always seem to have at least 1 or 2 guys that you want to talk about for these drafts, and Ashman's probably the one for this coming one. So we'll find out pretty soon of what we'll get to know more about him, obviously, as the season goes on. All right, speaking of the 2025 draft, there's a lot of these guys that are going to be drafted coming up. There are some 2026 guys too, but Dayton, who increased our stock the most? I mean, it's probably an obvious one here. The guy that we talked about with Czechia, Benak, but is there anyone else that kind of increased their stock coming out of this tournament?
Yeah, Benak, I think, is the obvious choice. And if you guys know me, you know that I don't pick the obvious choices. So I went with Matthew Lansing from the United States. I thought his finals appearance, he scored 2 of the prettiest goals I've seen in junior hockey in a long time. They looked just so effortless, and he wove in between like 3 Swedish guys for that second goal he scored. He's got some really high-end skill. I think his ability to control the play and control the puck like that is going to serve him very well. He was the Americans' goal scorer leader, by the way. He had 4 goals in 5 games. Didn't have any assists, so that might be some concern for others. But in a quick tournament like this, I think somebody who shows at least flashes of that really high-end ability is somebody you're going to want to pay attention to. And I think Lansing had maybe some of the brightest flashes.
Yeah, I think he probably would be the next one up from Benak. I mean, it is a very short tournament, like you said, but you can still draw things from it when you look at some of the plays these guys can do against their peers. So yeah, it's still pretty good. Peter, I'll weave this into a question I was going to ask you later, so it actually connects really well. Who increased their stock the most that changes your rankings? The early ones that were put out before this. Who do you think is going to rise from this tournament?
Again, you don't want to put too much stock into just one tournament because this is just the start of it all. I mean, but you got a lot of information from this tournament, and I think Klingsell and Gastrin from Sweden really stood above the rest in terms of like other names that I didn't maybe have on radar, but now they did with their performance. I really like Nicholas Sikora on Team USA. I really thought that he had his offensive prowess was very on display. 4 points in 5 games. Has a powerful shot to boot, and yes, that is the son of Peter Sikora. I will also go to say Alex Huang from Team Canada. I know he was paired with Matthew Schaefer the whole entire tournament. It's going to be easy when you're playing with, the best player or the best defenseman, but he really stood out. He was very composed as well, didn't panic. He looked great when he had the puck, great without it as well. So those were some names that really stood out for me that I think increased their stock and I think may have changed my mind from my previous rankings. It's going to change for my preseason one.
Yeah, like you say, it is a very short thing. You don't want to put too much stock into it, but it does influence rankings where you're looking at, maybe I'll bump them up a bit or something like that. What about Peter? What about underwhelming guys? I mean, like I say, it's a short tournament, so I mean, you don't really put so much if they didn't stand out. It's like, oh no, they're not going to be very good now. But who'd you find kind of, maybe you thought was going to be a bit better in this tournament that wasn't?
I really thought the whole Team Finland. I really think that would have liked to see a little bit more from everyone else. I think, like I said, Westergaard was probably the only one that really stood out in a big way. And not so much of overall performance, but just wondering how his suspension is going to affect his draft year. Maybe not so much, but the way that Braden Coots got that 2-game suspension for undisciplinary, spear to the midsection, not fun at all. Not necessarily an underwhelming factor because he did look great on that top line when he was playing, but you got to wonder if that thing kind of like, leaves a bad taste in, scouts, in the scouts' mind about whether he could keep things under control when things get heated a little bit. I did like his whole entire tournament until that instance, and that may necessarily, be a factor in terms of like where I could probably rank him. But I think maybe still good value in like second or third round.
Yeah, you don't like seeing that undisciplined type thing from guys, even though hopefully it's not a trend that you start seeing. If it does, well, that obviously will affect how scouts look at him. He's got to rein that in for sure. Dayton, what about you? Is anyone that you felt was a bit underwhelming in this tournament?
Yeah, there was a few names that jumped out. I think on Canada, like we mentioned before, they had a really strong, really deep roster. I was a little underwhelmed with Jake O'Brien's performance. He just he didn't have a single point in 5 games. I thought he was at least, showing some bright moments. He was involved in the play, but for somebody who had 64 points as a rookie in the OHL last year, he should have, I think, been a bit more prevalent. Another guy I was expecting to see at least a little bit more from was Adam Nemec from Slovakia. Now he is a 16-year-old, so I don't want to put too much stock into it, but looking at his brother, of course, that is Devils defenseman Simon Nemec, he played in the 2019-2020 season at the Hlinka Gretzky, three years before he was drafted. Nemec is only playing 2 years before he was drafted. And I don't know. I thought somebody like with that kind of pedigree would be putting up some pretty big points. I think, Gavin McKenna looked like he is going to be a top prospect, if not the top prospect for 2026. Nemec, I don't think had that level, and I was a little bit disappointed to see that.
Like I say, it is something that it is different, and it is maybe unfair to look at guys like that and their brother's so good, and you should be similar. But yeah, it was probably something we want a bit more from him, and we'll see as the tournaments go. All right, last question before we close here. Dayton, was there anyone that kind of you're looking at more closely now that you weren't thinking of before this tournament? Now that this one's in the books.
Oh, definitely. Vitsa from Czechia. I think he was easily the most interesting player that I came across in the tournament highlights. He is going to be somebody I'm paying attention to very closely as we get closer to the 2025 draft.
All right, Peter, what about you? Anyone that stood out?
Yeah, three, but I'm going to make it very quick. Eddie Genborg on Finland. We talk about, or teams love those menacing type of physical players, and he was definitely physical. He made his presence felt not just throughout the tournament, but even in that game against Team Canada, he was making some big time hits. And at 6'2", 185, considering that teams value that, I think he's going to be someone that maybe isn't nowhere near top 3 rounds, but someone that could definitely be of value in the mid to late part of the draft. Brady Martin from Team Canada. As Dayton mentioned him before. I really think that he has a chance to be my Jetlachenko for this year. Really strong standout season with the speed, the playmaking, the intensity and work ethic that he has, and Quinn Beauchene on the back end. Hampered by injuries last season, but I think with his tournament right now, he looked very steady. One of their other better defenders aside from Huang and Schaefer, and I really expect a big season from him and taking a big step as a result.
Yeah, all great names. I think Jack Ivankovic really stood out to me as someone that, I mean, I knew of him, but I didn't think he'd be in the discussion of being potentially the first goaltender off the board, or maybe a first round pick, because there's been talk about that now. I mean, yes, very quick tournament, but he was very impressive. And goalies haven't been really prevalent in drafts last couple here, so maybe he's going to break that trend and be a first round pick. But long way away from that. But this tournament a good start for him, and we'll see what he does in the OHL this year to kind of solidify that or even make it better. So we'll see. But thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dayton, for coming on, talking Hlinka Gretzky. We'll get back to our series of deep dives for our prospect pools next week with the Utah Hockey Club. This is our first time we've ever delved into their prospect pool, even though it is the Arizona Coyotes prospect pool. We have looked at it, but this is now a new team. So we'll talk about them. But until our next episode, make sure to check out everything at thehockeywriters.com. We got everything prospect related in the Substack coming out all the time. Lots of prospect coverage from all the teams. So make sure checking all that out. But until our next episode, we'll see you next time on Prospect Corner.